Hello and welcome to Nithrania Game Club. My name is Branislav Berec and you're watching Game in a Nutshell, the series of videos designed to teach how to play various board games. Today we're going to learn how to play smartphone, including the expansion called Update 1.1 and including the solo rules using the Steve as the artificial intelligence player. So let's get started. Smartphone is an economic game in which players take roles of companies producing smartphones and selling them across the world. Following these phases in each round, they will set prices for their products, produce goods, develop technologies, expand to new regions for higher sales, and of course sell their products. The goal of the game is to gain the most victory points by selling the products and dominating the regions. Place the game board in the middle of the table. Place the round marker on the first space on the round track and the face marker on the first space of this face track. Shuffle these improvement tiles and place 5 of them face up on this improvement area. Place all the remaining tiles face down nearby. These goods tokens don't have to be shuffled, place them nearby as well. Place 6 patent tiles on the matching spaces on the game board. Then place the technology tiles next to the matching patents. For a first game, you can place them with this front side up. In later games, you can also use this back side, which is indicated with these purple corners at the top of the tile. Or you can mix them with the tiles from the Update 1.1 expansion, and you can find the recommended technology sets in the expansion rulebook. Then place this victory points scoreboard somewhere next to the game board. Then each player chooses a color, takes all the components and markers in that color with the tray and 2 pads, one of them with this light symbol and the other one with a dark symbol. By the way, those symbols have no effect in the game. Then take the player screen and the initial improvement tile of the same color. Place one of your office markers on your home region, which is shown on your player screen, and also by your color on the game board. Each player places one cube marker on the scoring track, on the space with their color, and then, in the same order, on the space 5 in the pricing area. If you play with less than 5 players, you need to cover up some spaces with the retailer tiles. In a 4-player game, you have to cover up the Canada region, and since it's a small region, indicated with this S letter, take one random small retailer tile, and they're also indicated with this S letter in the top left corner, and place it with the random side up on the Canada region. Then place a random retailer tile in the medium region where there's no office marker. In our example, it's Australia. In a 3-player game, you would cover Europe and the Republic of South Africa, and then the remaining medium regions where there's no office marker. And in a 2-player game, you would cover Canada, Caribbean, and China. And again, all the medium regions without office markers. For 2 and 3-player games, you can also use the special game board, which I will cover at the end of the video. The game is played over 5 rounds, and each round has 8 phases. In this first phase, the planning phase, players will use their pads to plan actions for the entire round. Those actions are determined by the visible symbols on the pads. In the second phase, players will set prices for the current round. Based on their visible symbols, they will increase or decrease the price. Prices determine the player order for the upcoming phases, with the lowest price going first and the highest price acting last, and therefore prices are obviously the key element of the game. Then, in the third phase, players will produce goods. Based on the selection made in the first phase, players will move the available number of goods markers to this available goods area. Then, in the fourth phase, the improvement phase, players will either take one of these available improvement tiles or one of the goods tiles. Then, in the fifth phase, the research phase, players will research technologies which are at the bottom of the game board. They boost sales and provide other bonuses. In the sixth phase, the logistics phase, players will have a chance to expand to other regions. With new offices in the new regions, again, players will boost their sales. Then in the 7th phase, the sell phase, players will finally have a chance to sell in the regions where they have an office. They will sell their goods to the buyers, and again, the player with the lowest price goes first, and the player with the highest price goes last. And in the final phase, players will score victory points for the current round. The game ends at the end of the 5th round, and players will score victory points for all the goods they sold during the game, then for controlling the markets, for their offices in the retailer regions, and also for these patent tiles, which are only awarded to a player who is the first one to develop that technology. The player with the most points is the winner. Now I will explain all these phases in more detail. In the first phase, the planning phase, players will use their pads and improvement tiles to plan actions for the entire round. They all do it simultaneously and secretly behind the player screens, but for the sake of explanation, I will obviously remove it. To plan your actions, place one pad on top of the other pad while keeping two simple rules. First, you must cover minimum 1 space and maximum 4 spaces. You can even cover these empty spaces. Second, you still have to keep this grid format, so you're not allowed to do something like this. You may use any side of those tiles, and you may freely choose which one will be on the top and which one will be on the bottom. It all depends on what you want to do in the given round. Then you may also use these improvement tiles. Each player starts with one initial improvement tile, and over the course of the game you will acquire or you may acquire more, and when you use them you always place them face up, and you must always cover 2 spaces on the pads. So the improvement tile may not extend beyond your 2 initial pads. If you want, you can even cover other improvement tiles. And you can even cover the improvement tile with the upper pad. If you don't want to use any of your improvement tiles, place them in front of you face down, and this symbol indicates that this tile will produce 1 goods marker during the production phase. When everyone's ready, remove the player screens and proceed to the second phase. At the start of each round, all prices are reset back to 5. In the second phase of the round, players will adjust their selling prices, and for each of these symbols, they would increase the price by 1, and for each of these symbols, they would reduce the price by 1. In the third phase, players will produce 1 good marker for each crate symbol, including the ones with this $- symbol. So here we have 4 symbols, and for each symbol, place 1 cube marker from this area into this one, which is the available goods area. Then for each space, which is covered by the upper pad, so in this example 2 spaces, move 1 additional goods marker to the available goods area. Don't count the spaces which are covered by these improvement tiles. So even in this example, this improvement tile will not generate additional cubes because it covered the bottom pad. Only these 2 spaces are counted as covered spaces. And finally, for each goods tile, you would also produce 1 more good marker. Starting with the 4th phase, the player order becomes important. In this game, it's called the priority rule. The player with the lowest selling price acts first, then the player with the next lowest price, and so on and so forth. In case the players are tied, the player with the least amount of victory points goes first. And if there are players with the same selling price and the same actual number of victory points, follow the order from the start of the game. So in the 4th phase, following the priority rule, each player has 2 options. If you have this yellow improvement symbol visible, take one of the available improvement tile of your choice. You will be able to use that tile starting with the next round. If you don't have that yellow symbol visible, take 1 goods token and place it into your tray. It will start generating good markers starting with the next round. At the start of the 5th phase, the research phase, each player will receive 1 of these progress markers for each visible research symbol. So in our example we have 4 markers. Now, in the priority order, each player will have to spend all their markers to research technologies. Place the markers next to the technology you want to research, and if you want, you can split them into multiple technologies. This number indicates how many markers are needed to research that technology. If you reach that number, place one of your office markers next to the technology, which indicates that you have researched it now. You are now allowed to use the bonus from the technology, which might be a one-time bonus or the permanent bonus. You can find their description in the rulebook. Then take all your markers back to your supply. If you are the first player to research that technology, take this patent token and place it into your tray. You will get this number of victory points at the end of the game. After the technology was researched by at least one player, the cost of research of the same technology is reduced by 1 for all other players. If you research a technology and you are the first player to do that, and you take the patent tile, and there are players who now have sufficient number of progress markers to research that technology, they would be allowed to place their office marker and actually research the technology. In the logistics phase, players will have a chance to expand to other regions and build offices there. Each player will get 1 progress marker for each visible logistics symbol. Now, in the priority order, players have to spend all their progress markers to expand to other regions. You may place the progress markers to any region which is connected by this black link to region where you already have an office. You can distribute these markers any way you want. Then, similar to technologies, this number indicates how many progress markers you need to expand to this region. When you reach that number, place one of your offices to the leftmost empty space in the region and take your markers back. Normally, one player can have maximum 1 office in a region, but that can be changed by certain technologies. If you don't reach the number required for entering the region, your markers will stay in the region for future rounds. If the region has this retailer tile and you reach the number required for entering the region, don't place your office to these spaces. Instead, place it on the retailer tile. You will score the indicated number of victory points at the end of the game. In addition, you can take this immediate bonus, which are all described in the rulebook. Again, take your progress markers back into your supply. In the 7th phase, the selling phase, following the priority order, each player will sell all their goods. When selling goods, you can only sell goods to a region where you have an office and there are available buyers. You may not sell goods to the regions with the retailer tiles. There are 2 types of buyers, these red buyers and the purple ones. Red buyers have this number which indicates the maximum price they will pay. Purple buyers will pay any price, but you have to have the required technology. So again, in the priority order, the player with the lowest price will sell all their goods first, then the next player in the player order, and so on and so forth. You can sell to multiple regions if you have offices there, and each buyer will only buy 1 good marker. In addition, you have to sell from left to right, and if you meet the condition, you must sell to that buyer. So in our example, this buyer is only willing to pay maximum 2. However, the price of the blue player is 4, so we skip that buyer. The next one is willing to pay 4, so he would buy 1 marker. Next one is willing to pay 5, so he's happy to pay 4 for the blue product. The next buyer requires this technology, which blue player has not researched yet, so blue player is not allowed to sell to this buyer. However, he has this gamepad technology, so that's another happy customer. Then in Caribbean region, this buyer is willing to pay 7, but again, happy to pay 4. And since blue player doesn't have these technologies yet, the selling phase for the blue player is over. Any unsold products are lost immediately. Now, for the sake of clarification, let's say the blue player only has 2 goods to sell, and with the selling price 4, he is not required to use both goods in one region. he can actually block customers in other regions following the standard rules. He would not be able to sell directly to this customer because with the selling price 4, if he meets the requirement, he must sell to the buyer. And finally, in the 8th phase, players will score victory points for the current round. They would score victory points for all goods they sold multiplied by the selling price. So in this example, the blue player sold 4 good markers for the price of 4, which is 16 victory points, which is marked on the victory point scoreboard. And then players would score dominance in each region. The player with the most goods markers in a region will score the victory points shown in the rightmost space of the region with the office marker. So in this case, blue player would score 3 points. In Caribbean, blue player would score 1 point. If the rightmost space with an office would have 2 numbers, then the player with the most markers would score the higher number of victory points and the player in the second place would score the lower number of victory points. If players are tied, then the player with the leftmost marker wins the tie. Then at the end of each round, as these 4 icons indicate, first all players will take all their goods markers back to their supply, remove any remaining improvement tiles and draw 5 new. All the prices are reset back to 5 and move the round marker to the next round. The game ends at the end of the 5th round. In addition to the victory points scored during the game, add the victory points from patents and from the retailer tiles. The player with the most points is the winner. The game comes with a virtual player called Steve who simulates an opponent. You can play a 2-player game against this virtual player, or you can use him as an AI player together with other human players. When setting up the game, count Steve as another player, so if you would play solo against him, set up the game for a 2-player game. Choose color for Steve, but he doesn't need the standard pads and he doesn't need a player screen. However, give him this player board and obviously the starting improvement tile. Place the tile face up on this delayed improvement space. By the way, the reason why the Steve's game board is placed horizontally in this video is to make sure that it better fits the camera frame and you can see more details. Then take this Steve marker and place it on the game board. Place him to the largest region available from his starting office. So looking at the options, we have small region of Republic of South Africa, medium region India, and then links to USA and Caribbean. Caribbean is a small region, but US is the large region, so place the marker somewhere next to that region. If Steve would start in CIS, he would have China and Europe as well as the 2 largest regions available. In that case, place the Steve marker to the region with fewest offices. And if that still doesn't help, choose the regions alphabetically. Now, in the first phase of each round, take the delayed improvement tile and place it on the space of the current round, and as indicated by this symbol, give Steve this goods token. Then, during all the subsequent phases of the current round, all these visible symbols count. So, in the second phase of the round, set prices for Steve using the same standard rules as for other players. Then, in the production phase, count all these crate symbols and also these goods tokens. In this example, Steve would produce 7 good markers. In the improvement phase, take the top improvement tile from the game board and place it on the delayed improvement space. In research phase, Steve will get 1 progress marker for each research symbol visible and place them first on the technology which Steve is already researching, then on the least expensive technology that has still the patent available, and if no such technology exists, then on the least expensive technology that Steve doesn't have yet. Then in the logistics phase, Steve will get 1 progress marker for each logistics symbol visible, obviously not counting the delayed improvement tile. And then Steve would place these markers to the region with the Steve marker. Now, if later in the game, Steve would build an office in that region, take the progress markers and move them back to the Steve's supply, and then you have to move the Steve's marker. Using the same rules as during the setup, Steve's marker will move to the largest region available, which in this case is Europe. However, if there's more than one largest region available, choose the one with the least offices, and then alphabetically. When determining the largest region available, don't look at the position of the Steve's marker only, look at all the regions where Steve has his offices. In the selling phase, when selling the goods, first place one marker to each region where Steve is the only player. Follow the standard rules for selling, so you can only sell to a buyer if you meet the requirements. So, since Steve's price is 3, the first good marker would go to this buyer. After regions where Steve is the only player, continue placing markers to each region with 2 or more offices, any offices, including Steve's offices. So, one marker would go to Australia here, and the other one would go to USA. Now, continue placing markers into these regions, one by one, in the alphabetical order. So, the next marker would go to Australia again, then to USA, and since Steve doesn't have any of these technologies, he can only continue in the US region. If he would still have any remaining goods markers, continue selling to the buyers in those regions where Steve is the only player. Again, if there's more than one such region, alternate between these regions in the alphabetical order. Then, in the 8th phase, score the victory points in the standard way. Now, I will cover the components which are in the 1.1 update to this game. First of all, this smaller game board is used for a 2 and a 3 player game, or a solo game against Steve. When setting up the game, randomly choose the first player, and that player would choose one of the companies and take all components of that company. Then other players in a clockwise direction would do the same. Then the last player in the player order will choose the starting position from one of the medium-sized regions. These starting positions are marked with this kind of a rainbow space. So, after choosing the starting position, all other players in this reversed player order choose their starting position as well. If this was a 2-player game only, the last player in a player order would randomly choose one medium and one small retailer tile, and after placing their starting office, they would also place these retailer tiles in the corresponding region of their choice. Then this game board only has 3 slots for the improvement tiles. And finally, there is a new type of buyers. If you would sell to this buyer, you only have to meet one of those conditions. Directives are common goals for all players. However, each directive can only be claimed by one player. When setting up the game, shuffle all the directives and randomly choose 3 more than the number of players in the game. So for a 4-player game, you would have 7 directives. Place them somewhere next to the scoring board. Each player can fulfill maximum 1 directive per round. That is maximum 5 directives per game. When you meet the condition, take the directive tile and place it face up somewhere in front of you. Keep it face up to indicate that you will not be able to take another directive this round. Taking the directive is not mandatory, so even if you meet that condition, you can skip taking the tile for 2 reasons. You can either try to gain a different directive for that round, or if you change your mind, you can take the same directive later in the round during your turn. Then at the end of the round, flip the directive face down to indicate that this directive was gained in the previous round, and in the current round you can gain new one. The update 1.1 comes with a few new technologies which you can mix with the ones from the base game, and you can find a recommended mix of technologies in the rulebook for this expansion. And finally, when you get more familiar with the game, you can also try this hardcore mode, and for that you will need these new pads, but I will leave it up to you to read the changes in this game mode. So that's how you play smartphone. If you would have any questions or comments, please put them into the comment sections below. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. If you like the series, please subscribe. My name is Branislav Berec. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell, and hope to see you next time.